This is a Blackmagic Cine 12K cinema camera.
You're watching CineD, supported by B&H and CVP.
CineD here from NAB 2024 at the Blackmagic booth with Craig. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Looking forward to the show. It's been a long time coming for us this year and looking forward to what it will be.
Well, you guys make NAB worth it, to be honest. I mean, like a gazillion announcements. I was actually watching Grant's stream from the plane getting in here. Weirdly, you can watch video streams on some planes now, which is amazing. But I was like, I wanted to sleep, right? And he kept me awake for like 3 hours. And of course, the internet would drop every now and then. But it's like, okay, he just keeps going and going and going and going. And one of the biggest announcements we have here in front of us, what is this?
So this is our new camera system that we've announced for NAB 2024 this year. This is the URSA Cine 12K. This really is a culmination of all the work we've been doing over the past 12 years in digital cinema. Working and building towards what we wanted here was almost our dream camera system. Knowing and working with lots of high-end DOPs, working into very high-end digital film production, we approached this new camera with the intent of, if we could build a camera that we would want, you know, no holds bar. I think Grant described it as no cost, really. We didn't want to be concerned about what it would cost to build the product. We wanted to put in every feature that we know customers look for, that we know that DOPs and camera ops need on set, and build the ultimate product that we can have now with an amazing upgrade on the 12K sensor technology as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it is in a similar body shape as the URSAs, like the URSA Minis actually, but there's some significant differences, right?
Yeah, well, it's a redesign. So it looks familiar in size and shape. We've kept a lot of the key ergonomic areas the same, so you'll find buttons and controls are in the same positions. It has the same family feel as the URSA products you've seen before. The monitors and all of the rigging areas are the same. But it is redesigned. It's redesigned internally in terms of performance and the capability of the camera. There's a new lens mounting system, so we have a universal and interchangeable lens mount option, so you can switch between PL and EF. We have a new media system built in here, which uses new Blackmagic URSA modules for the actual recording media. Even things like the buttons, we've changed the buttons on these cameras to be soft touch and silent. So again, if you're working on a quieter set, we don't want there to be clicks. So just little things and subtleties like that. We've integrated an entirely new rigging system, so we have new base rails with universal dovetails. We have now our own 19 and 15 mil rod systems. That then integrates into a top handle and mounting set that leads to a new EVF. So we've designed the whole EVF system to be the same. The camera is also now beam mount as standard, rather than say V-Lock and gold mount on the previous models. That just means we've got a greater power capacity in the camera. And then we've got utilities like Wi-Fi and camera to Blackmagic Cloud integrations as well. So it's a complete new generation of camera system.
So there's a lot of things you mentioned that we have to touch on, of course. Let's start with the sensor and the mount. So this is also a 12K sensor, but now it's full frame, which means that the pixels are considerably larger. Does that affect the low light capabilities of the camera?
It does, yeah. So the previous model for the 12K URSA for us was a step in a new direction. It's an RGB, symmetrical RGB sensor, so it's an alternative from what we've put into previous cameras as a Bayer. That in itself gave us, when that camera came out 4 years ago, a different approach to how we're working with high-end digital film. It's a lot more color uniformity, a lot more color reproduction capability when we take that through DaVinci Resolve. Now, taking that generational step forward to what we have now with a full-frame sensor, by pulling out the sensor size, we keep the resolution and the megapixel count the same, but we increase the photosite size by a third. So that means there's multiple ways in which that improves things like dynamic range. You know, larger photosites is one element of it, but also the way that we're using the RGB and also the W, the luminance sampling of the sensor, allows us to increase the threshold of our dynamic range. So this camera is now 16 stops dynamic range rather than 14 on the previous iteration. To be honest as well, once you get that into DaVinci Resolve, we've got our highlight recovery capability in Resolve. With it being an RGB W system, you're probably going to find that the low light performance or just the range and the latitude you have in the camera will outperform anything that we've done before.
Amazing. Yeah, we're looking forward to testing it in our lab tests to see the dynamic range results and, of course, rolling shutter. Let's talk about rolling shutter. Any information on that?
Well, with a rolling shutter, obviously what we always want to do is minimize skew. There's technologies, again, that we can use because it's RGB rather than Bayer. So with the symmetrical pattern, we can actually do processes in the sensor system that can improve rolling shutter than, say, if it was a Bayer system on our previous cameras. So we're happy with where the rolling shutter sits. Now, there's always going to be instances where camera motion or in-frame motion can be problematic. That's unavoidable with a rolling shutter, but the speeds that we have we're comfortable with. There's a published table, I think you guys had it in your initial release, so if anybody wants to see what the actual readouts are, we've published them across all sensor resolutions and across all frame rate options. But to give you a quick guide, let's say it's slowest, which isn't slow. If you're shooting at full 12K open gate 3:2, you're getting at 24 frames a second, around about 12 milliseconds of rolling shutter speed. When you take that into 8K and 4K open gate, that drops to around 6 milliseconds. Then when you drop down to 2.4 to 1 modes to shoot in that cinematic scope at 8K or 4K, that's sub 5 milliseconds. So we think they're really reasonable, very usable shutter speeds, with it being a rolling shutter and at a 12K resolution as well.
The sensor is really capable, like also in terms of the aspect ratios. You guys really thought about it, including, which is nice because that's not true for every manufacturer, but it's nice to have all the anamorphic D-squeeze options and also 3x2 open gates. What are your thoughts behind that, and what is the actual target audience for this? Because, of course, I mean, that's the first, I would say, high-end cinema camera from Blackmagic Design. I mean, you probably can't talk about, like which other competitors you want to tackle with that, but who are the end customers you want this to use? Is it really like high-end Hollywood, or where do you want to go with this?
I think there's two answers to the question. The first is the technical in terms of, yes, we built the camera to offer a full range of aspect ratio and resolution and formats that people will want, all the way from the open gate option. The anamorphic D-squeeze is available through 12K, 8K, and 4K. Again, because we're using an RGB sensor, we've got in-camera and in-sensor scaling. So you'll get full width, full field of view, no cropping across all formats.
So no line skipping or anything like that. It's actual downsampling when you switch to a smaller resolution and still use the full sensor width.
Absolutely. As soon as you shoot in, you don't want to shoot in 12K because you want to manage your data, so you'll shoot 4K for a particular project. When you drop down in the sensor, it's still full field of view, no cropping on the sensor. And all of the anamorphic modes, all of the in-camera formats apply through that resolution range. Anamorphic modes in every flavor, 1.3, 1.5, 1.6, 6.6, 1.8, and ×2. So you can choose your lenses. We tried to be as open as possible and give that flexibility in there. The second part of your question, I guess, is, well, who's the camera for? Well, look, our ethos, ever since we made our first 2.5 camera, which came out 12 years ago, with that small little cinema camera, was that we wanted to bring high-level, Hollywood-capable digital technology down to an affordable price point. Now, this camera at $15,000 is the most expensive cinema camera we've ever released, but we still believe that it's aspirational for people to move into. So from people that are independent filmmakers, people that are shooting corporates, commercials, we think this is going to be a camera that will be very attractive to them, certainly in terms of the flexibility, the performance, for us, integration into post-production, and the work that we can do from camera to cloud, or our workflows into DaVinci Resolve make it a massively efficient camera for customers at that level. Then from, say, like the top down, we know our camera systems are used throughout high-end television and Hollywood feature production. We're principally maybe not the A camera in most instances, but we know that we're used and seen. This is a statement of intent from us to go, look, we have the technology, we can build the sensors, we know the performance and capability of our technologies, our workflows, and we're striving and working to continue to push into that market space. We would hope, one day there'll be a nameable Hollywood feature that we're the A camera on that, but we got to mature into this. And this is certainly a technology that matures Blackmagic into that market. The answer is, well, I guess we'll find where this camera sits. There's going to be people that will be willing to save up because they'll see this as the dream camera for them. And, we put it at a price point we think is affordable. And we hope that those people could afford and aspire to it. Then likewise for those guys that are probably looking more to rental, and $15,000 for a camera is, not much really. This will be attractive because of its performance, its capability, and its workflow efficiencies. So, you can't be all things to all people, but we certainly try to be as open as possible and sort of available and sort of aspirational to everybody as well.
Let's stick with the resolutions just for 1 second. We had a few questions, people asking if there's actually possible to do like a Super 16 crop or something like that.
Possible in the future, perhaps. It might be something we look at as a feature request. Not currently in here. We have had 16mm modes in previous URSA cameras that will take you down into the older lenses, and I know there's a lot of love for 16mm Cine lenses, certainly going back in some of the old 70s and 60s lenses that we've seen used.
Or even B4 mount, like just put broadcast lenses on it. So that might be something for the future.
I think B4 might be something slightly more different, with this camera being really designed as a cinema product rather than a production product. So you see with like the URSA Broadcast, which is a cousin product to this, that we have that universal approach. This camera, though, is specifically for digital film production in that sense. So it currently offers what we feel are the best options. Maybe we'll see what those others are in the future.
So the camera has 12, 8, and 4K modes, but there's also a 9K mode built in. What is that?
So this is specifically designed to then match to Super 35. So it is a crop to the sensor, whereas the 12, the 8, and the 4, I mentioned, do the full field of view, no alteration to your Super 35, so your 35mm or large format lenses. The 9K allows us to match the URSA Cine to, if you're shooting with film, for example, or if you're shooting in a Super 35 mode with either anamorphic or spherical lenses, we can then match to that. And then there are aspect ratios in here that will match to 4perf, 3perf, or 2perf as standards. So the camera has a utility and a comparison should you want to shoot and work in a Super 35 mode as well.
You talked about the mount, so it comes with a PL mount. It also includes the interchangeable EF mount?
Yeah, it does. So the camera comes in two purchasable options as a body only. It'll also come in a custom Pelly case. So you get a housing for it and something, transfer and travel with the product. It'll come as PL fitted. You get an EF module that you can attach. The universal lens mount option means that you can remove the PL, just simple 4 screws on the front, and then load on the EF if that's your option for the day. One of the things we've changed with that approach as well is that you can now shim on the mount side, on the universal mount, not to the body. So if you change between lens mounts with us, you don't then have the time to shim, test. You can just swap them out quickly between it.
Great. Just sticking with the mount for a second, there have been a few questions why you went with PL and EF as opposed to L mount, which you introduced with the 6K Pro, which a lot of people like, that for the first time you can use mirrorless lenses with the camera. So what's the thought process behind that?
That's more to do with the engineering and the design of the camera rather than not wanting to use L mount. The universal mount that now allows you to swap out between EF and PL, that housing doesn't have the flange depth that we would need to be shallow enough to accommodate an L mount. So therefore it's just restrictive in terms of what we can offer. So we put on those two options, which still remain probably the two most common options for lens choice, but we don't have an L mount alternative currently.
Okay. Let's actually look at let's talk about the recording a little bit. This is something completely new. I can take it out here. We'll show it in the B-roll, but you'll take out the recording module. So this is something completely new. 8 terabytes, right?
8 terabytes in the camera. So when you purchase the camera, you'll get a module included for 8 terabytes. Our intent and our thinking around the media module is that we wanted to have onboard media that doesn't give you any fallibility and has complete capability right up to the highest. Say we're shooting open gate 12K, 3:1 Blackmagic RAW. That's a very high data write speed. We're at 4 gigabits per second. We needed some recording media that had sustainability. Now, we will offer a caddy that can be loaded to the camera if you choose to use CF Express. So we don't have a completely proprietary approach. There is going to be third-party media support. But naturally, with those kinds of medias, there's a
limitation.
There's an upper limit, right? So that means the camera, the sensor, the performance that we've built into this camera unit now outpaces the media that we could previously offer. We needed a solution for that. So we've built these caddy systems around NVMe M.2 media. It's 4-lane PCE, so the write speeds on them are phenomenally quick. the intention there is as well how we can load off that media. We need fast media so you can actually then data wrangle accordingly as well. So if you're shooting high data rate, high storage content, you can take that media out. You can now use one of our new media docks, which the guys are demoing on the front on the Resolve stations, and load in the M2 cards or the actual modules here and offload those into it. But because it's fast media, we can also read off it rapidly as well. So the camera has a 10 gig ePort built into the camera system. You could plug in live to the camera from a DIT station or from a production trolley, and actually either be pulling the data and the files from the media off camera and data wrangling, or with something like a REST API, you can actually be integrating and managing the media, or you could have a direct Blackmagic Cloud link. So you can be recording in media, writing to the fast media at 12K, and then taking that across into Blackmagic Cloud at the same time. And it also supports our proxy files that we introduced with Cinema Camera 6K last year. So we're recording proxy at ProRes HD in camera, so you've got a workflow efficiency there as well. So what we wanted to do was build a media recording system that gave you performance in camera, but also gave you capability to do fast offload as well from the camera.
Awesome. So one module is actually included with the camera, right? I mean, that's actually quite cool, because how much is one? Like $2,000 or something?
About $1,500 for the 8 terabytes. We will do a 16 terabyte option as well. And then I don't think it's on the website right now, but there will be a price and an availability on the CF Express version as well.
And there is, I mean, the reader is, though, it can read 3 modules at the same time, I think, right?
Yeah. So if you're on a multi-camera set, for example, you don't have to wait for the cameras. Maybe you don't want to directly link or can't directly link to the cameras. Yeah. So you can still data wrangle as needed to. You can do fast offload into a 3-port dock. Each one of those docks is 4-lane PCIe with Ethernet on the back as well. So there's a whole workflow connectivity speed that's built into them.
Let's talk about, just for a second, about codecs. We're still with Blackmagic RAW plus what else?
Just Blackmagic RAW.
That's true. Okay.
All resolutions, all flavors of Blackmagic RAW, so the constant bitrate options and then our constant quality versions.
What's the bit depth for the RAW?
We're a 16-bit down to 12-bit recorded on Blackmagic RAW, again through all formats. Just in relation to, say, media, if you were kind of in your head thinking, well, if I was recording OpenGate 12K, how long would a 12 terabyte module offer me? On the main product page for the camera, there's actually a calculator. So you'll see it's about 4 hours as a top there. So we use Blackmagic RAW because it's more efficient for us. It's designed and built for our sensors. There's a kind of trilogy between the way that we approach our media and our cameras. So we have camera capability and a sensor scaling and the sensor profiling within inside the camera. So the Blackmagic RAW then is efficient, and we have hardware encoding in camera. Blackmagic RAW as a codec and as a recording format gives us efficiencies in terms of data size, but without having high compression rates for color and for image performance. And then we have the connection into DaVinci Resolve for actual processing and the color delivery of those. So again, going back to where we were 12 years ago with our first cinema cameras, for us it was always about how do you get the highest quality image off the camera that we can then use in DaVinci Resolve. We've always approached cameras in that method. Blackmagic RAW for us is that link between camera and DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah. Nice. This camera actually has one of the most advanced displays for assistants that I've ever seen. So it's like a full additional 5-inch display here, and it does show lens data as well, which is kind of amazing. How does the lens communicate with the camera?
So we support eye data, say through Cook lenses or whichever lenses have that capability in there. The intention of adding the screen on the side here was previous cameras have had the rosette mount, which hasn't been used, but it may be a little bit of real estate on the camera that was underused. On the original URSA, the full body that we did, which is quite a while ago now, it's 9 years ago, we did have a similar concept, but it was a very basic system. The idea is it's a production assistant. So if you've got camera operator or DOP on one side, production assistant, say whoever's focus pulling or racking on that, has got a visual guide in here. They can pull exactly the same menus either side of the camera, so you could have somebody that's maybe doing the control of the camera and the record setup without having to affect the operator on there.
So you can literally operate anything you can do from the operator side, also from the assistant side.
Absolutely. Knowing that camera setups for where we are, knowing this camera will be used, isn't going to be a single person operator. It's going to be a team with guys that are, operating for a certain task on the camera. So rather than having one on one side, we've got it duplicated. The cool thing about the lens options, though, is we built a new UI, and there's actually a button here for it, which is the lens choice. We have a new UI that talks and takes that lens data. It's always been available in our metadata in camera. So we do frame-by-frame lens information in metadata, say for VFX or for Resolve. But we're also taking that data now live to the UI. So we have this brilliant new little UI here. So as we scroll through, say, the focal range of the lens, you get a visual representation on the side. What we've actually built as well is, and this was pretty impressive when I found out about it from the product managers, if you put a lens on this camera for the first time, it will learn the lens. So what it'll do is if you put the lens on, you just roll it, say, to its shallowest focal range, and it will set a marker, and then using AI and understanding the image change that we can see through the focal range, you take it to the other end of the lens, and now it knows what that lens focal range is. It'll do the same for the iris as well. If you take that lens off and put it back on the camera, it will remember it by serial number.
Serial number?
Yeah.
So the eye data actually sends the serial number?
To the camera, yeah, so we can identify it. So you can pair cameras to a lens. The camera will learn the lens and it understands the optics and the iris and the capability of the lens. And then as an operator as well, with this little plus mark on the UI, you can actually set up lens markers. So if you wanted actual visual representations, you can actually add lens markers onto your focal racking as well.
Very nice. Yeah, that's a very innovative approach. Sweet. Connections. You said there's two 12G SDIs, right?
There's no SDI input. Again, that's more of a concept that we have on our production cameras where we need to send camera data or camera control back into the camera in a production or a broadcast environment. In this instance, it's more about what do we need to take off the camera for monitoring. So we give you dual 12 gig SDI. That means you've got effectively more capability for plugging in, whether that's director assistant stations or taking an SDI feed back or anything that's localized to the camera that wants a 12 gig SDI feed from it as well. You're not having to hang off a DA system or anything that's going to split that for you or give that to you. The third SDI is a reference and timecode input for you as well. So you've got the capability of that on the back of the camera. Front of the camera, something that we've not had on the cameras before, but we know that they're a necessity in terms of where this camera now matures us to, is to have a lot more remote and external accessory capability. So we have two ports. One is a 3-pin Fisher, and the second being a 7-pin Limo. Both of these are 24 volt, 2 amps shared between them. So we've got a lot of capability on the camera to power and connect servo motors for focus or any range monitoring or maybe any off-board transmission that you want to do from the camera as well. And they're all standard. So currently going through the process of testing which follow focuses or motorized systems can work. But as a standard, we're pretty confident most things on here will do the job for you.
I also see antennas up there. What about wireless connectivity?
So we have a Wi-Fi capable camera. So again, where Ethernet may not be the appropriate connection, may not be necessary, we do have a Wi-Fi capability built into the camera. So that means you can actually drop probably more suitable for the proxy files. So again, if you're working in a workflow where you want to drop those proxy files into a Blackmagic Cloud workflow, you want to give access those to the editorial team or...
Which format are the proxies? Also Blackmagic RAW or no?
No, they're H.264, they're HD res. So as a proxy format, they're enough to get you started, and obviously you can then do your, going back to good old offline on, but as a connectivity from the camera, again, going back to what Grant spoke about, we built a dream camera. Like if the Ethernet isn't an option for you, it isn't what's needed, we still want to have an operability where we can pull media from it. On the other cameras, on the URSA broadcast, again as an example or comparison, we tether to a mobile phone. That's probably more suitable to ENG when you're out in the field and you might be using cellular or mobile network connectivity. But when you're on a production and you've got a Wi-Fi mesh, then you're probably easier and it's much more reliable for us to connect into that and just directly drive that media from the camera to your storage and your cloud services.
Awesome. We talked about powering, so now it's B mount. 24 volts is, I guess, simply needed for the amount of quality that is produced.
There's a lot of processing in the camera. There's a lot of FPGA performancing. It's a larger sensor. We're driving 2 LCD screens. So it's a very power necessary camera system. So we moved it up to B mount to give us 24 volts. but also likewise beam mount being at that higher standard for digital cinema. So we will look at maybe gold mount and V-lock options, because I know you can have a 12 mount depending on the battery manufacturer. It will come fitted with a beam mount plate. We'll have some future possibilities for alternative mounts in the future. And then on the mount as well, you also do have a 2-pin 12-volt on the back. So again, you've got an extra power outage. And then say with these particular bebops that we're using, you've also got a good old-fashioned D-tap on top. So just extend, again, the accessibility and the power options to build your production crew around the camera.
Very cool. I think we covered most of it. Anything else you can think of? I think the viewfinder we do a separate video on, because that's also used on the Pixis camera. But in terms of camera, anything else you can think of?
Probably in terms of maybe the last couple of things in terms of connectivity. We have USB ports. There's 2 at the top of the camera and there's 1/3 at the back.
That's also for offloading footage?
Or for if you wanted off-board USB-C recording as well. So, and as we'll talk about the EF, but the EF is USB-C powered. So we've kept it open that we might have future accessories where USB-C is an option, because that gives us data, it gives us power through a very common terminal connection as well. And then the only other things would be in terms of the operation of the camera. We spoke about buttons. Everything is driven through Blackmagic OS. So again, if you're familiar with any of our cameras over the past 3 or 4 years, all the way back to the pocket cameras that arrived in 2018, 2019, the menu systems, the performance and the capability of what we offer through Blackmagic OS is all built into this system as well.
Very nice. You already mentioned pricing. It's $15,000, right? For without the viewfinder, but there's also an option with the viewfinder, right?
Yeah, so I said previously it comes with the Pele case. It'll come with mounting top rail. It'll come with a battery. So the $15,000 gives you that. I think it's $1,650. Check the website to be sure, which will add in the EVF and the mounting accessories to bring that online as well.
Availability?
Shipping in May.
Thank you, Craig. That was quite a comprehensive video. There's a lot to talk about, of course. We'll have separate videos on the new Pixis camera and also on the viewfinder and on DaVinci Resolve. So check them out on the CineD YouTube channel or on CineD.com. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for a lot more coverage from NAB 2024.